right. Good morning, everyone. For some reason, I'm still hearing the countdown music, but there it goes. So, this.
You went quiet.
I'm hearing an awful feedback. I might need to leave and come back. This is not a good way to start the episode, but that's okay. A little adversities. Yeah, I've got to leave because each time I start talking, I hear myself.
I don't hear anything. I hear nothing.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
We're fine.
I'm gonna come back.
Yeah, just come back. Okay.
Right.
So Billy Bob was. We were talking to Billy Bob before the show, and we were going to start with Israel. So I guess we can start on that until he gets back. But so there's a couple big developments in that department. So there was this big back and forth between Biden and Netanyahu in Israel. On one hand, the Biden administration was kind of giving themselves a pat on the back, like, oh, we advocated, we used our leverage, that word everybody loves to say, and we never see any evidence of it. We used our leverage to compel Israel to promise to strike energy infrastructure in Iran in their retaliatory strike. And then today I saw some news from Israel actually walked that back, said, no, that's BS. We never made such a promise, which I found interesting. And then the other major development that I saw was what they're colloquially calling the general's plan. That it's basically complete ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza, and they're just openly saying it. They're not even. And the interesting aspect of that is a lot of people were a lot of commentators were saying that a year ago. That some people were actually saying the October 7th attack was a false flag, or Mossad allowed it, and the IDF allowed it. And I don't know if I don't know if I personally would go that far with it. But a lot of people are saying, this is going to be a justification for ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza, which Israel has made noises about wanting about for a while. If anybody, and you were always shut down as an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. That's nonsense. They would never do that. Our greatest ally would never do something so mean, And then here we are a year later, and it's pretty much out in the open now. That's exactly what they're doing. So anyone else have any thoughts on that? Billy Bob, how's your audio?
Yeah, no, I want to apologize. That was very problematic technical difficulties. I just was hearing, everything that was being said was coming back like 3 seconds later. So it's much better now. But yeah, thank you, Ian, for covering. Co-host Ian Kummer from Moscow. I got Max from Baltimore, Chris from Campbellford, Canada. And we titled our episode. I don't know if you guys said this while I was gone and came back, but it's a real broad topic. It just seems more and more likely that World War III is more of a question of if, not when. It just seems the U.S. doesn't seem to be trying to make nice and figure things out in a peaceful way. So, but. All the fronts, what is it called? West Asia, Ukraine, China. These are all spots that the U.S. seems to want to continue to escalate. So yeah, the biggest thing is, of course, we're all waiting for Israel's response to the October 1st missile barrage that Iran conducted. And, like Ian was saying, the question is, what is Israel's response going to be? Is it going to be something subdued, because there was different reports. The first report was they have agreed to tone it down, and Iran had actually agreed not to respond. There was a report that said Iran had agreed that if Israel launches a limited retaliation, Iran will leave it at that and won't respond. And then that was leaked, and then the allegation was that that story itself caused Iran to backtrack and say, no, we didn't agree to that. And now the most recent one was that Israel's gonna, go big. So anyway, Max, let's hear your thoughts on this issue.
Well, first of all, I'm not so sure that we're headed for World War III.
I'm catastrophizing. Fair.
Well, I just think that there's clearly a division within the U.S. establishment, namely, especially among the military, because Israel, I think, is is counting too much on the U.S. coming to their rescue if they were to strike Iran in such a way that Iran would have to go with a tit for tat. Really, they came within not that far of the Mossad headquarters in that strike earlier this month. So I feel like that was something of a warning shot. It was measured, but they also were not far from, being able to wipe out Mossad headquarters. So that's significant as measured as their response was. But I just think that Israel is counting too much on the U.S. coming to their rescue, especially when you factor in that Russia has been very clear that if Israel attacks Iran, it could get involved, and that Iran has the backing of Moscow. And I just think that there's a significant division within, there's a lot of generals and people in the military brass that really have a sober perspective on the fact that a U.S. confrontation with Iran, an all-out war, would not be a cakewalk. It would not be like even Iraq or Afghanistan or any of that. It would be Iran has hypersonic weapons capability. It's in recent years really beefed up its arsenal, and they know what reality would be. And I think that, yes, the Israelis are really trying to provoke something here and draw the U.S. They've been trying to do it for decades, and I think that Pentagon strategists and people in the military know that that's not a good idea. Even though, yes, Israel is a strategic asset in the region, I think a lot of people underestimate the fact that the U.S. would be, at the end of the day, be willing to sacrifice Israel. It's not if it becomes enough of a burden, they will abandon the Israelis, which is why I really push back against the idea that, as strong as the influence of the Zionist lobby is, at the end of the day, they don't dictate all of U.S. policy. And Iran is the perfect example. And I do think that we're headed possibly for a regional conflict that threatens to draw in other players. But World War III, talk about that is very hyperbolic. And obviously, it's a discussion that needs to be had. I'm not dismissing the danger or even the prevalence of insane, of insanity to run in high places. You got lunatics like John Bolton that would love to start World War III everywhere, whether it's on the Ukraine front or in Israel. But I think that there's serious infighting going on about what the next steps are, and should the U.S. be forced into a position where they have to come to Israel's aid if Israel really strikes Iran and Iran retaliates. I think, and also the election potentially is going to affect that and be a factor as well. The differences can be debated about how Trump or Harris would respond to that scenario, whether it happens now or come January after Trump is sworn in if he wins. So, but I think that the talk of World War III is a little hyperbolic, but I do think that Israel is seemingly making very desperate moves and trying to force some kind of situation where the U.S. would be crossing the Rubicon. I don't know. It's definitely a recipe for something brewing here that could be a real powder keg. But what that's going to be, I don't know. But I don't think that. I think at the end of the day, the U.S. would choose to protect itself, even if it meant sacrificing, a strategic asset as vital as Israel to the region. Because Iran could, with its energy resources, they could do things that would really impact the world economy if they were to be directly attacked by the U.S. and Israel. Yeah. They have. I mean, I hate to use the word leverage because Ian just pointed out the stigma around it, but no, I mean, it's true. They have, and the Houthis are a fact. I mean, Israel is. I don't understand how Israel can continue to exist doing what it's doing with these. I mean, the impact on the Israeli economy has already been significant. People are leaving in droves at Ben Gurion Airport. Who is going to want to stay there if there's a perpetual state of war where it's constantly, in conflict with its neighbors? I mean, it's not like that's going to die down anytime soon, even if there is a ceasefire. I mean, you can't kill what the Lancet Journal said, almost 200,000 people, and that's almost and probably an underestimate. You can't kill that many people and just be like, oh, truce, sorry. That's a lot, and especially after assassinating Nasrallah. I mean, this is not going to die down anytime soon. Israel has totally isolated itself in terms of the international community. It's just getting impossible for its backers to propagandize and cover up this stuff, these atrocities that they're committing that are being live streamed on social media. There might not be coming back from this. Israel is committing suicide, I think, ultimately in the long run. And I agree with people like Ian Pape and others who are predicting that Israel, certainly not the state it's in now, will exist in 5 to 10 years. I don't see how that's possible if it continues this direction.
Well, let me ask this. So, I mean, what precedent is there for saying the USA won't back Israel? I mean, since the 1960s, when has the USA not backed Israel?
Never. I mean, it's always backed Israel. It saved its neck in 1973 when Israel was defeated by Egypt, without the American Air Force coming in, because all the Israeli Air Force was destroyed. Everything, every aircraft was destroyed. So the Americans sent in their planes with American pilots and put Israeli markings on them and saved the day. Otherwise, Israel was defeated in that war. They turned that around for Israel. I would hope that Max is thinking that there is opposition inside the American military sector for a major attack is correct. I don't know. Maybe there are some people like that. Well, we see like Gregor and all these people who have insight into these things. But if you assume that the United States controls Israel and orders it what to do, not the other way around, then if Israel strikes Iran, you know that they've been told to do so by the United States. And when you see in the press all these discussions, Israel's and the United States have agreed that Israel can do this, and we agreed Israel can do that or not do that, you see who the master is. What we're seeing in the press is the Americans discussing with the Israelis what the strike should be. And since they're being chewed up in Lebanon, they've only advanced half a kilometer, and they've suffered major casualties. And the Hezbollah attack yesterday on the Haifa military base shocked them, because that drone got through and killed quite a number of Israeli soldiers and wounded many more. And the Iranian attack on the airfields, which seems to have destroyed some of their F-35s, which impinges on their ability to launch stealth planes to attack Iran. Will they do it? Well, it looks like they're talking about doing it. And since Israel is not winning in Gaza, it's not winning against Hezbollah, it's in a bad state, as Max has pointed out, economically and every other way, societal way. The only way out is to expand the war and crush Israel, therefore crush Hezbollah and everybody else. And the only way we can do that is to attack Iran. On the other hand, you have Iran is backed by Russia, and the S-400 systems are there, and probably Russian pilots flying some of their jets for them. Now the Russian defense minister is visiting China with the Chinese defense minister yesterday and today, discussing things. Putin just presented to the Duma a request to ratify the treaty between Russia and North Korea as a military alliance. You have the serious drills against Taiwan by the the Chinese forces in the last 2 days after they stirred up trouble again. So one can think that World War III is looming as all these crisis points are getting hotter and hotter and hotter. The Chinese are losing patience with Taiwan. Russia's withdrawn its ambassador from the United States. They haven't appointed another one, which is usually done simultaneously. Antonov was withdrawn. They say his term expired because he was retiring. But in any event, it doesn't matter. He's being withdrawn and nobody's being sent in to replace him. Nobody's been named. Peskov said the other day that when he was asked, does this mean there's been a downgrading of relations? He says, well, not really. We'll appoint another one in due time. Well, when's that? Right now, there's no Russian ambassador in the United States. He's being withdrawn. It's not a good signal to me. When Russia withdraws its ambassador, it doesn't appoint another one. There's trouble brewing.
So this is like our panel here is illustrating the complexity of the situation, because both Max and Chris are making rational analysis of the situation, but it's kind of polar opposite, right? It's like one is the United States is gonna look after its own interests and let Israel fall. And then the other is the United States has no choice but to double down and go all in, because if they don't, the trajectory is obvious and clear what's going to be happening over the next several years. So the United States feels this need to do something. So I don't know. Israel seems very confident in their ability to draw the U.S. into a war. Like, I think it's within Israel's decision-making process to do something provocative enough that is going to force the United States to join them in a war against Iran. And I don't know, it just seems like it's not really up to the United States. But on the other hand, we do have leverage. We could say no. We could put a stop to it. But like Ian was saying, I've never seen that happen. I don't see that happening now. Everybody is just giving total lip service to, hey, Israel has a right to genocide. Israel has a right to, But no, thanks, guys. A great analysis from Max. Great analysis from Chris. That's really good stuff.
I mean, just to follow up on what you're saying, I mean, it's not just. I was watching Scott Ritter on Andrew Napolitano's show, and he was saying that Iran not only is not afraid, clearly has demonstrated they're not afraid to stand up to the U.S. and Israel, but that they have the capability to totally destroy Israel in a matter of hours with their ballistic missiles. And they could destroy the, everything you're talking about with the energy resources that Israel is, they're going back and forth about whether or not they promise not to hit energy infrastructure in Iran. Iran has the ability to hit Israel's energy infrastructure. It's power plants and Do
you think Israel just learned that, or do you think they knew that previous?
Well,
because
some of them, they have to know that, and that's what I'm saying. That I just think that eventually they're going to have to come back from the brink here. Something is going to happen because, and there is some precedent. I've used the example before with, Saddam Hussein after he was set up with the, first Gulf War, they gave him, April Glaspie, gave him the green light to go into Kuwait, and then they threw him under the bus. Saddam, bombed Tel Aviv. I mean, it wasn't as significant a strike as this most recent one by Iran, but it was still, it was Scud missiles hitting Tel Aviv. And Israel wanted to retaliate, and George H.W. Bush, of all presidents, used the aid as leverage, in order to preserve the anti-Saddam coalition with the Arab countries. So there is some precedent for it. I mean, not in recent history, and it's certainly not since October 7th. Israel has been off the leash and, it's been a PR disaster for the West backing them with the atrocities that they're committing. But if it really starts to threaten U.S. interests, I mean, the same with the Saudis. Look, when the Yemen war became a disaster, a public relations disaster for them, they considered bin Salman a loose cannon, and that's sort of a similar thing is kind of happening with Netanyahu. Netanyahu is looking out for himself and not so much the interests even of Israel and the U.S. And they've tried to isolate bin Salman diplomatically. It hasn't been very effective, but I could see a similar kind of scenario happening with not so much under Trump, but with if it depends on the outcome of the election. With Harris, I could see that sort of a scenario if that there will be an attempt to isolate and even possibly remove Netanyahu. And there are a lot of people within Israel, not because they care about the atrocities being committed against the Palestinians, but they can see the writing on the wall with what's going on, what is doing to Israel's future. And I can see them wanting to have a different head of state to try and preserve what's left of, Israel's standing in the region. Well,
I agree that a rational leadership would not attack Iran because Iran has promised. It said a couple of weeks ago, if Israel attacks, it will destroy all of the Israeli infrastructure, its power plants and energy systems, everything. Oil supplies gas fields will be destroyed. It'll shut the country down. So Israel, knowing that, no rational person would tempt that response. But are we dealing with rational people or people who are desperate and irrational? Well, then Israel uses, instead of launching just more ordinary missiles, use planes to launch nuclear missiles at Iran and destroy the country completely in one strike. It's got 180 to 250, who knows how many nuclear weapons they have. That's a factor. Would they dare use them? Sure they would. The Americans use them. So why wouldn't Israel use them? Why have they got them if they're not going to use them? And that's a fear of mine. But yeah, rationally, they shouldn't do it. Doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? Just commit suicide. But that's what they're doing now by these wars. I mean, any rational leadership would say this war has failed. Let's just go and sit down with Hezbollah and the Palestinians and as the Chinese and everybody else are calling for, have peace negotiations at a big conference somewhere in the world and settle it. There's some sort of settlement which will last another 10 or 20 years. I don't think you're ever going to get a final solution for this one. But they're not doing that. They keep pushing this war. And yes, there are personal reasons for Netanyahu. And there are also not just the American interests in controlling the Middle East. The Zionists have their own parallel dreams as well. We know that also is in the mix. So, but I still don't think that Israel will do anything unless the Americans want them to do it. I don't think they're going to they're not pulling the United States into a war. The United States is pushing them into the war. That's my view. But of course, yes, there are Zionists who have these dreams of a greater Israel from the sea to Iraq to the Euphrates. I'm sure they dream about that. So they have their own agenda as well. I don't dispute that. But so we don't really understand what's going on in their thinking, and none of us really do. But these are all the balls in the air, and one wonders what is going to go on. But it's very dangerous. It's very volatile because we can't decide what they're going to do because we don't know what they're thinking.
Ian, you were going to say something?
Yeah, so to say it's true that George Bush showed restraint with the Scud attacks, but look at what happened to Bush. He's a one-term president, and I would say is actually pretty extraordinary considering the Gulf War was basically the USA's only notable military victory since World War II, but he was still a one-term president. And then his son reinvaded Iraq, which was extremely contrary to American interests. It was, however, exactly what Israel wanted. Saddam was considered by Israel one of their major regional rivals. And what Chris said about the nuclear deterrent, I think it's a true statement that any nuclear power would use the nukes in the face of absolute defeat. No country would willingly be destroyed with the nukes unfired.
Well, South Africa had nukes.
Well, they weren't destroyed as a country, though. They did willingly, as they are one of the extraordinarily rare cases of a country dismantling their nukes. But that's not. I wouldn't say that's a comforting precedent for someone not firing the nukes in the face of an invasion that's threatening to liquidate the country effectively. And also Israel has the Samson option, and that's troubling because the official stance of the Israeli government is to not confirm or deny the nukes, but Israeli academics, Israeli mouthpieces are quite open with their statements that they wouldn't just nuke the Arab states, they would also nuke the European states, like Professor Martin Van Creveld out of Jerusalem University has quite openly said that we would nuke European capitals if Israel fell.
Why would they do that?
Well, it's literally a Samson option. Samson was dying, so he
pull down everything.
The temple on everybody, yes. And it's true. You have to also look at it from the Zionist perspective. From the Zionist perspective, Christianity is just as much, if not more, of an enemy than Islam. And if you look at what Zionist mouthpieces, they're still mad about the Roman suppression of the Judean uprising 2,000 years. I mean, they're still mad about it, which is kind of amazing. And they see European countries as the successor states to the Roman Empire. So you're talking about religious fanatics. So, so if Israel was actually collapsing, on the verge of absolute defeat, I would not put it past them to, nuke Iran, nuke everybody else in the region, and also fire some missiles at Rome and whatever other European capitals they have in range, because we don't know what's in range, and we don't know how much of it is a bluff either.
We also have Trump. We also have Trump.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt. We also have Trump just a few days ago saying that if he was in charge, he would bomb Iran right now, and Israel should bomb Iran. So I don't see where we're going with either Harris or Trump. What the elections have to do with anything with vis-a-vis Israel, because they seem to both be all on the same page.
I think they might be timing. Israel might be timing their response to have maximum impact on the election, which is November 5th or something. It's pretty soon, and so their response will be timed to maximize, chances for Trump to win. And I think Netanyahu probably would be way more happy with Trump. But what are you saying, Max?
Well, I just think we have to not forget that the only time in human history that nuclear weapons have been used was by the United States in Japan when there was no mutually assured destruction. I'm not trying to dismiss the insanity within the Israeli leadership, but yes, I don't necessarily put it past them to consider that option if Israel as a state, as we know it, could potentially not exist as a last resort. But that would also, that's not, using the nuclear weapons in that situation wouldn't preserve Israel as a state either. In fact, it would mean their destruction. They would mean that, because Iran, I don't know if they have nuclear capability. It's disputed that supposedly their nuclear program does not have a military component. But given that in recent years, Biden didn't they didn't re-enter the nuclear deal. They may have that capability and we don't know it, but either way, there's regional powers that would come to their aid that have that capability, certainly. So the nuclear deterrent factor is there, and they would have to be truly insane because to use nuclear weapons against any of their neighbors, because it would mean their own destruction. So, I'm not trying to.
They're getting destroyed anyway. That's
the nature of Israel, but I don't. I don't. And that's why I brought up the example of South Africa. They had a nuclear program, and that scenario was raised. It's used to hang over, like, oh, we can never get. There was a time where it was unimaginable that South Africa would. Apartheid would not exist, and that came to be. So I don't see why that's not possible for Israel, even counting the fact that their leadership is religious fanatics and all that.
What about, not to change the subject too much, but what about Chris's suggestion that anything that Israel ends up doing against Iran is going to be something that is the United States wants them to do? So, is there a situation in which the United States is looking for a way to start to consolidate some gains, because they're not doing so well in Ukraine and they need some wins, and they're thinking, this is gonna be our gateway into a broader new paradigm, a new world where it's, everyone for themselves, and the U.S. is going to say, to hell with these international law, international norms, and, we're just going to, every option is on the table to pursue our own interest. And, the gateway is, first, we're going to do our best to destroy and regime change Iran, put the Los Angeles Iranians back on the throne. And that's going to be our first victory. And then from there, we're going to move on to other places. Like, this is maybe a wet dream of, the Israel First kind of contingent, the Israel First faction, in the Western ruling establishment is, hey, as far as priorities go, let's make Israel our top priority. And then once we win there, we'll consolidate, and then we can move against, double down against Russia, maybe double down against China. Anyway, and so, which path to Persia was the paper from 2009 or something. I forget which corporation, which think tank came up with which path to Persia. But they really did lay out how we're going to allow Israel to work as our proxy, and we're going to have plausible deniability. And this will be our avenue of regime change in Iran without getting a lot of PR blowback, because we're going to be able to blame Israel for it. Brian Berletic's great. He's advancing that. I like that. It makes a lot of sense. But other analyses make sense as well.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult to say. All these things are. Any rational person can accept any of these arguments because they all seem logical. But I think we're at the point where the United States, as a claimed hegemon of the world, is realizing it's losing it rapidly, and so it's engaging in these wars in Ukraine with Israel, Iran, and then things against Venezuela and China in the Pacific. And they're right now, they're confined as regional wars or regional conflicts. Anybody thinks each one can be solved independently of the others, but that's not how the Chinese, Russians, Iranians, and North Koreans are seeing it. They're seeing themselves as one bloc being attacked. and they have allies in other places. So the United States may feel, the leadership may feel, or the deep state may feel, that if they lose any one of these wars, they will lose their hegemony. So they have to have a big war. They have to dominate, they have to crush Russia and China once and for all, right now, before it's too late. And that's my fear, that they will decide to start something big. And it may start off, it may be Ukraine, it may be China, maybe all of them all at once. May break out. And we can actually argue we're in World War III now. I mean, you can say that. You can say that we've been in a world war since 1914, and those wars have never really been solved. They've just been continuous wars with pauses. If you look at World War II and its timeline, it's much like this period now, because when the Germans invaded Poland in 1939, it was then Britain and France declared war. Nothing happened for almost a year. Then they attacked Britain and France. Then there was a pause for a few months. Then they attacked Yugoslavia and Greece. Then there was a pause. Then they attacked Russia. Then the Japanese were attacking, but separate years before. But there were stages to it. But when you're looking back on it, it seems like one big, long conflict. And it was. But they had stages to it where there was some peace in between. I think we're in a similar situation now. We're actually in a world war for control of the world. And the question is whether it goes into what we all know is going to be a nuclear war, a general conflagration. And we all hope not, but the United States has always taken the aggressive road. I don't see it backing down and accepting defeat as a hegemon and letting Russia and China be equal to them or above them. I don't see it.
So
I wish it was so, but I think if John Kennedy was in power, you'd get people like that, but they killed him, you know.
Yeah. I think Max would argue in defense, and I'm going to make his argument for it, is that there is no military option against Iran. That's a losing debacle. It'll be a colossal failure for the West to try and regime change Iran, to try and
not
defeat
now.
Iran.
I think there was probably a window where they did have that opportunity in the past, but not now. Not with the fact that Russia and China are backing Iran. Russia is no longer, one sort of imperial project, the NATO expansion, kind of led to Russia's return to the world stage, and that's sort of offset this other plan. I mean, you could also say that, the plans for a greater Israel are, also a part of U.S. strategic foreign policy in the region. And if you look at something like, there was this paper, I believe, published in the 80s by an Israeli academic, I think, or strategist called the Yanon Plan, that really lays out a lot of the balkanization and the infighting that's taken place in the Middle East the last several decades, which a lot of those, the Iran-Iraq war, the Sunni-Shia divide, the Wahhabism, seemingly conducting a genocide of Shias, many people have argued. The divisions that have been fostered in the Middle East, that was kind of part of, and also the plans for, independent Kurdistan as well. That's why a lot of people a lot of analysts consider the Kurds to be a Israeli strategic asset as well. But a lot of that has been thwarted by, first of all, Russia coming to Syria's aid in the Syrian war, and that's sort of put a wedge in, Israel's plans for the Middle East to carve it up and balkanize it and make it, they want to take parts of Lebanon and Syria all the way to the Euphrates. And a lot of those plans have kind of been thwarted. And as far as the U.S. being in a position to attack Iran, I think they're not, at least not right now, and not with the way that they have, the axis of resistance has stood up to U.S. hegemony in the region. I don't think that they're any longer in that position, and the failure of U.S. Other U.S. forays in the region, Afghanistan, Iraq. They failed in their attempt to conduct regime change in Syria. I mean, there's the Israel's plans for greater Israel and U.S. foreign policy in the region. They're very much interwoven, but they do have points where they diverge. The U.S. also, because of the war in Syria, has seemingly lost an ally to some extent with Turkey. I mean, Turkey is also a factor, and they've warmed in relations with Russia, and they seemingly want to join BRICS. I don't believe Erdogan, any of his lip service he pays about helping the Palestinians, but you even have Saudi Arabia dropping, the dollar and moving in closer relations with Russia and China. So, I mean, the U.S. I just don't think that the U.S. is in any kind of strategic position to directly attack Iran. Whether or not they're in a position of desperation and they're going to do something like that, that's another argument. But from a rational standpoint, I don't think U.S. Pentagon strategists are sitting there thinking that a direct attack on Iran would be a good idea. I mean, they're not stupid.
But are they smart enough to realize the desperateness of their situation? Like, isn't the United States, isn't the Western Empire
there have been internal. I'm not saying that that's the consensus, but there have been internal papers published by, basically spelling the doom of U.S. hegemony if we don't make changes. It's not exactly a secret. I don't think.
Well, is it though? I mean, who is saying that though? I mean, hearing a lot of, well, they're desperate, well, they're losing. I mean, who? I mean, if I went to the White House right now and interviewed every single person in the White House, how many of those hundreds of people would say we are losing in the Middle East or we are losing in Ukraine? Would I be able to find even one person who would say that to me?
I mean, I don't know if I can answer that question. I do know that you have certain, I have seen certain think tanks, and I've seen it's not exactly a secret that the U.S. is bogged down and has overextended itself. I think that's pretty much universally recognized.
I mean, the Ukraine war is not going as hoped.
Well, here's the thing. So, I read internal papers back in 2008, 2009, saying that we were losing in Afghanistan, but that didn't. Yeah, the war dragged on for another 10 years. So
well, yeah. I mean, the Pentagon papers. I mean, they knew that the Vietnam War was. They had no
right. So my
strategy.
point is that saying, well, somebody, some guy out of, there's literally millions of government employees in the USA. So saying I found one guy who wrote a dissident paper saying we're losing doesn't mean that's a mainstream opinion. It doesn't mean anyone's going to act on it. That's kind of my point. So as far all I can see right now is.
But when you're talking about a move that would mean existential, that would be an existential threat to your own, directly attacking a country like Iran, or giving the green light to Israel to use nuclear weapons against Iran, which there would be no coming back from something like that. I mean,
well, we got I hope you're right, Max. I mean, I don't say you're wrong. I can't because we don't know, but the withdrawal of the Russian ambassador from Washington is a dark signal to me. You don't do that unless you're expecting to launch an attack against a country you just withdrew the ambassador from. Why would you withdraw him, except for safety? Maybe they'll nominate another one, but the delay is worrying. And the Americans are now talking with Zelensky. I hear there's going to be a meeting with Biden in Ramstein somewhere with Zelensky soon about maybe approving long-range strikes into Russia. I mean, and we do that, you're going to get a nuclear war in right away. But they seem to be thinking about it. Why are they even discussing such an option? Why is the war in Ukraine going on when obviously the Ukrainian army is defeated? It's on the run. It's almost becoming a route along the line of contact from Kursk on down. And there's more and more NATO troops. Russians reporting meeting more and more NATO officers and troops, not just mercenaries, in these combat zones. They're going to roll over Ukraine unless something is done by NATO or the United States to stop it. And I don't think that, and the rhetoric is that Ukraine is going to win. You got Zelensky's victory plan. It involves just terror strikes on Russia, hoping to get a nuclear strike on Russia. And going back to Canada and Ottawa at the end of this month, there's going to be a conference organized by Norway and Canada with Zelensky discussing Russia's human rights crimes in Ukraine, kidnapping children and executing prisoners and all this nonsense. And Russia today, I saw in TASS, told Argentina, you better not go there because they were talking about attending. It's not going to be considered an unfriendly act. It's just a propaganda exercise, which it is.
It sounds like something Javier Milei would love to be a part of.
Well, of course, that fascist. He's a Nazi, obviously. I mean, he's just destroyed Argentina and making things worse there. But he's got the support. And then now I think there's an American general touring through South America with the friendly nations there to how to corner Venezuela and overthrow the regime in Colombia and so on. So I just see that the United States is acting, and in Taiwan we have the sharp Chinese reaction to the Taiwanese president saying that Taiwan is an independent sovereign state, and the immediate surrounding of Taiwan by the PLA forces the last 2 days, and the Americans are provoking this deliberately. So we hope that they're rational, but they keep pushing.
Well, that's
China,
the thing.
Iran, Russia. Why, if they're rational, why they keep pushing?
Yeah.
And there's a trigger, like we don't know when the trigger is going to be, but they keep pushing against whatever the trigger is, or that line which is going to be crossed. Why? Why would anybody? Why not just let's have a talk? Why can't we just all settle these problems?
So, and the thing is, Iran understands that Israel doesn't do anything without the say-so of the United States, and so Iran has said if Israel attacks, in a big way, their energy platforms or infrastructure, that they quite possibly are going to respond and attack United States bases in the area, not with just proxies, but with their missiles. And so at that point, you could see our world changing forever, because you can see the Western press is waiting for the green light to start promoting war, and that could be war against Iran, and things will just change. Like today, it will be totally different than that next day. Like these PR offensives, like with 9/11. Remember after 9/11, it was just everybody was full bore. We're going to attack Iraq. We're going to attack Iraq. And like dissent wasn't tolerated. So they're waiting for the green light to promote their new propaganda offensive to do whatever the plan is. And so that's kind of what we're discussing. Well, what is the plan? But, it seems like Iran could be the plan. And we might see that very soon, with an October surprise right before the election, trying to get Trump in office. And then if all of that happens, what is Trump going to do? Is he really going to, put his money where Sheldon Adelson's widow's mouth is? I don't know if that made any sense.
Well, but you're right. Well, you're right. And Max is right in the sense that, of course, if they attack Iran and there's a war, the Straits of Hormuz get shut down, there's oil supplies are cut, the price of oil goes with $300 a barrel. It's a disaster for the world economy.
Now, the United States is a net global energy exporter, so we're actually an energy exporter.
It's struggling to do that. But let's just say that
we're in a
what would be
position.
the what would be the benefit? What would be the benefit of such an attack?
not.
No, hold
I
on.
don't.
What would be the benefit of such an attack? The benefit would be it would destroy the oil supplies to China. China would be destroyed immediately. The economy would collapse immediately because they only have their oil supplies. 80% come from the Middle East. You cut those supplies.
The United States is in a position to tolerate that, and I think that's part of how they've become. We've newly become a net energy exporter, and so we're in a good position to deal with economic. I mean, and it's not a good. It's like we're going to sacrifice, but we're not going to sacrifice nearly as much as other people. Is the thinking?
They would be
I don't know.
committing. Any U.S. politician signing off on that would be committing political suicide. I mean, the economic damage that something like that would cause, let alone, I mean.
I could see a lot of pressure against Trump to go ahead and politically suicide himself, right? If he was in office. They tried to get JFK, they tried to force him to save the Bay of Pigs invasion, and he refused. But I don't know if Trump would be able to push off the demands to really go big against Iran. And he's saying that's exactly what he would do. And so again, is he going to put his money where his mouth is if he wins? But so me and Ian, like a couple months ago, we're thinking, no way they're going to let Trump 1,000 miles within the White House ever again. Be damned by what, how people vote. Nobody cares how people vote. Doesn't matter. Trump will never get in the White House. And now I'm having second thoughts, as always.
Well, I'm not sure why. To be honest, I don't know why you're having second thoughts because, as far as Democrats go, I haven't seen this mass exit. I haven't seen anyone say we're going to boycott Biden. As far as I can tell, if you're a Democrat, for Democrats, genocide is not a deal breaker for them. I think if there's any one lesson from the past 12 months is that genocide is not a deal breaker if you're a Democratic voter. If you're I've seen people saying that, but I don't think even most of these people doing pro-Palestine protests, I think the majority of them are, they do these protests. It's almost like a form of virtue signaling, and then they go and vote for Kamala. That's the unfortunate reality that I don't see this hurting Kamala very much, if at all.
And just say the military budget in the United States since the Second World War has not been a destruction of the United States economy for most people. And people have tolerated it all these years. They've said nothing about it. I mean, people protest, but the budgets were almost $1 trillion. And yet you can't really, now they're saying if you say they're not helping the people in Tennessee and North Carolina and Georgia from all these hurricanes, well, now you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, is there any help compared to what the Chinese or the Japanese doing as a major disaster? They send all sorts of thousands of people in to help. I don't see that there. So, and the Iraq War, the Afghan War, and all these other wars, Vietnam War. The Vietnam War bankrupted the United States. That's why it went off the gold standard, because so it could just print money. It was bankrupted. Nobody in the United States I saw on the streets protesting the destruction of their economy and inflation, which has risen ever since. Because they're brainwashed. Most people just don't. They live day to day. They don't understand why the prices are going up, and they just struggle to get by. And wars, I would like to think Max is right. I hope there are people out there. I mean, there are people out there. Max is one of them, obviously, Ian. But I don't see enough of them to take that tack. I think they could quite, like they did in when their oil prices went up before, in 1973, when Saudi Arabia and OPEC arranged the oil embargo of the United States. That was a result of American policies, and that was predictable. But the Americans pursued those policies, and there was a reaction. And people got angry about the rising price of oil and gasoline and so on, but they still did it. I don't see that being a factor, really.
Well,
I think
if
they want a war, they'll have a war.
Yeah, there is no way that the United States is able to maintain, its global hegemony without causing a global economic crisis. Because if you're going to hurt China, you're going to hurt yourself. And so the U.S. has resigned that we're going to we're going to have to sacrifice. And guess where that sacrifice is going to land, heaviest on is going to be, of course, the working people. But they're willing to do that. And they're pretty certain that the United States working class will sacrifice in silence as we do. So
I'm pretty sure that Medicare and Social Security will be next on the chopping block. Sorry, we can't afford that anymore.
Yeah. We're at war, guys. There's a global economic crisis. We can't afford these things. I mean, exactly. And that's going to be hit home by all the establishment media. And then they're going to start cracking down even harder on social media, so people don't, complain too much. But Trump, I think they like Trump because he's going to be the figurehead, the evil figurehead that's going to be the cause of the problems, because he's going to be the one bellicosely going to war in Iran, and you can blame him. He could be the scapegoat for all the bad things that happen. I don't think Kamala even wants that. She might, they might be still resisting. Who the hell knows? But that's why I'm rethinking that they don't want Trump in office. I'm thinking that it's definitely plausible that he does get in, and if he does, the question is he going to go to war with Iran like he's really out loud saying he's going to do, and it needs to happen.
Well, my response to that is the same as what I said to Max. I don't see that. I mean, you have fringe voices like us or Scott Ritter who say a war with Iran would be a disaster, but I don't think that's a mainstream belief. You ask anybody on Capitol Hill, you ask anybody in the White House.
No, I'm not saying that they say it publicly. I'm saying it with behind closed doors. I think that they know that would be
on
a
what
bad move.
basis?
That's why they haven't done it in the last several decades that Israel's been trying to get them to do it. They know that it's not going to be a smart move.
Well, up until 3 years ago, up until about 8 years ago, they had a large footprint in Iraq. And up until 3 years ago, they had a large footprint in Afghanistan. I don't know if it's an unwillingness to do it as so much as they just had too many irons in the fire. It doesn't necessarily mean I just don't see it. I just do not see it as I do not think it is at all a mainstream opinion that the USA wouldn't just easily crush Iran. And in fact, I would almost bet money on that you could ask 100 people, and 100 people would say, yes, we would annihilate them in 3 days.
Why have they not launched? I mean, multiple U.S. presidents have threatened to attack Iran, but they haven't done it. Why have they not done it?
So, okay, I have an answer to that. And I mean, I'm just off the top of my head.
A frightened dog barks louder,
It's timing, and it's when are we going to roll out? Because look, the global, things have to change. Things have to change. There's going to be sacrifice everywhere. How do we enter into this new paradigm, this new reality? And the timing wasn't right? Like, I mean, it's about timing. And so, there's planning. And I think that, they might be ready. Okay, well, let's go. We're going to need a global economic crisis. We're not going to hurt China without a global economic crisis. Yeah. We're not afraid of a global economic crisis. We need a global economic crisis. So if we need that, if that's the thinking, then it becomes just a matter of timing. When are we going to schedule the implementation of this global economic crisis? And I think that time might be coming. But
and remember that
really smart if it happens.
And remember that they hope that the sanctions, the embargo, the economic war against Iran would bring down the government there, which has failed. But that's why the sanctions imposed because of the so-called nuclear were just a pretext. The nuclear program was just a pretext to inflict economic embargo on Iran. They didn't give a damn about nuclear weapons. They got nuclear weapons. I mean, Iran could say, why should we get rid of our nuclear weapons if you haven't? This is stupid. That was just a pretext to impose sanctions, economic warfare on Iran, and crush its economy. It's made life miserable for many Iranians. Let's face it. This caused a lot of unrest there. And they almost succeeded in bringing down the government. So that hasn't worked. But they're now going to. So now they may be switching to another tactic, which is direct war. We don't know, but I'm saying.
But the idea
we don't. I guess we're looking at shadows, like Plato on the wall of the cave was saying shadow. We don't see reality because Max has got one view, we got another, and who knows who's right? Because we can't see we don't have all the information done to really analyze what's really going on behind the scenes, because we don't know. We can only guess by seeing little glimpses and shots of things.
I think the factors are, who do we blame? Who are we going to be able to blame? What is our narrative? So they need an economic crisis. We need a global economic crisis to weaken China and to implement, our best chance of maintaining Western global hegemony. So the question becomes, how do we roll it out? How do we sell it to people? And what is the timeline? Because there's just no way that China is going to be weakened unless there's a global economic crisis.
Well, yeah, I think we're going towards the main subject, which may be China, as a matter of fact, because just last week, I attended a reception of the Chinese embassy in Ottawa. I was invited there, and the UN ambassador Wang Di gave a long speech about Canadians supporting the revolution in the 1930s in China and supporting the communists, and we've always been friends. But now things have changed. We don't know why. We want peace and cooperation. And there are some Canadian military officers there just standing there. Nobody clapped. They just stood there looking. And the next day, after that speech, Canada slapped 100% tariff on electric vehicles and components against China, even though Canada doesn't manufacture any electric vehicles. And EU slapped 100% tariff on them, just as the Americans did too. So you got their economic warfare taking place on China. They're trying to squeeze their markets down, just to their domestic market. So this war is going on.
Yeah. We could be catastrophizing, and the rollout for this thing could take years, right? We're suggesting that there could be I'm suggesting there could be a really big leap in the next few weeks, but that could be totally wrong analysis. This war against China could play out, over a couple decades, really. But Max, what do you think?
Well, by that time, China is predicted to overtake the U.S. economically by the end of the decade.
No, that's what the think tanks are saying.
Well, but COVID, the response to the COVID, but really, that pretty much put the nail in the coffin as far as the U.S. economy. It has no productive power. The war in Ukraine hasn't really resulted in denting Russia's foothold as far as its economic influence in Europe, as far as natural gas goes. All these moves are just backfiring, and if they're trying to play some kind of long game as far as overtaking China and its widely predicted economic surpassing of the United States. That's why I think what is likely is they will try and instigate another kind of Ukraine-esque quagmire in Taiwan. That I think is definitely in the cards. And I think that China actually, if they're hoping to, reincorporate Taiwan into the mainland, I think that they have a window to do that while the United States is overextended. And actually, it would be a good time to do that now. So I think that that's a powder keg waiting to go off. And as far as what the immediate future holds, as far as Israel and Iran goes, I think that they will be probably. I don't know if I'm willing to even make a prediction. I don't really like to make predictions about stuff like that. But my gut tells me that it will be some kind of tit for tat, and there'll be measured strikes. But who knows? Maybe Israel will really go overboard and really hit Iran significantly. But I think at some point, the U.S. is going to have to do something to rein in Israel. And if Netanyahu isn't willing to go along, they might have to remove him. Or the Israelis will do that themselves, because it seems like a lot of, there have been mass protests in Israel. Of course, it has nothing to do with the genocide. It has to do with, his ridiculous corruption charges where he was taking, he was giving tax breaks to wealthy Israelis. This Hollywood film producer, was giving him Cuban cigars and all these lavish gifts for his wife in exchange for renewal of his U.S. passport, among a whole host of other corruption charges. And Netanyahu has effectively been a dictator there for a number of years. They tried to have that dual government, and that didn't work. That was a total political stalemate with his rivals. They're not. I think that eventually Netanyahu's going to become such a pariah that they're going to have to do something about that. But I don't know where this is going to lead. I don't have a crystal ball. I just don't see the U.S. getting into a direct war with Iran. I really don't see that happening.
Well, I think we can also look at it in the perspective of the defeat in Ukraine, because it's quite clear that NATO is really being defeated in Ukraine, despite the fighting still going on right now. And one thing that really connected the dots to me was the statement by the head of MI5 in Britain, Internal Military Intelligence, Secret Service. This guy, he looked like something out of a Harry Potter movie, or one of those kids anyway. He was raving on about how Russia and Iran are committing mayhem on British streets, causing all the protests, the strikes, the crimes, the murders, the knifings. All these is all caused by Russians and Iranians. And he made a major speech, public speech, saying this, ranting on like they're trying to fire up the British people for a war against Russia and Iran. And if you I watch CNN, I scan the American news, CNN, PBS. All I get is these talking heads talking about how bad the Iranians are, how terrible the Russians are.
Biden said if Iran tries to assassinate Trump again, that'll be considered an act of war.
I see it. Now it's them that did it. Oh, okay, yeah.
Even though the guy was literally fighting on the Ukraine front and recruiting people, it's Iran that did it.
Yeah, no. Iran,
so they will assassinate him and blame Iran. Oh, I see. Like they tried to do with Kennedy in Cuba. I see.
That's one plausible way forward. Otherwise, they're just preparing the way for Trump to have all the reason to go to war with Iran. But Biden said that. He said if there's another assassination attempt against Trump, it's going to be by Iran. It's going to be considered an act of war. That was
there you go. So is he promising that he's going to assassinate Trump and start a war? I wouldn't doubt it. But
I'm going to be thrown in Gitmo for having appeared on Press TV, I guess. Iranian agent.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, great discussion. We're speculating, but it's great to have you thoughtful gentlemen to parse this with and explore ideas and possibilities.
Can I ask you before we go? Sorry, Bobby. I just wanted to ask you what's your opinion of what's going on in the elections right now? Because from outside, it seems very strange to us up here. But who looks like they're going to win? Anybody, or does it matter? Or you think Trump may be assassinated or locked up? Or
I don't know. I think that I share some of the. I was very skeptical about the last election's results.
Easy, Max.
Well, yeah, I don't want to get us banned from YouTube. Either way, I just think, but part of me also thinks that the Democratic establishment to maintain its legitimacy sort of needs this bogeyman of Trump, because it's all they have to run on. And so I don't know. They seem very out of touch. It does seem like Trump has the momentum. Kamala, I think, has been a disaster, her campaign. But whether or not that's sort of permitted to happen, I don't know. Part part of me thinks that they would actually prefer a Trump presidency because everything that is happening can be blamed on him. That's what they did when it was actually very useful to the ruling establishment when he was in power for 4 years. But I also think that they, certain things that he wants to do ostensibly would put a monkey wrench in some of their plans. So but that's assuming that he's even sincere about them. He wasn't sincere about them in his first term. So I don't, whether or not he governs differently because he's not going to be running for re-election, I don't know. I have no idea. I think anyone claiming that they know what's going to happen with this election is really full of it. I mean, like the last election, I mean, there were people saying this and that about the last election and it went completely differently. So I have no idea. It's a mystery to me.
Well, I just remember that hockey stick voting result. Like, Trump was winning, and then we all went to sleep, and then it spiked 600,000 votes, which was conveniently the exact amount he needed to win.
Yeah, that struck me. I remember watching the election that night, and I went to sleep. He would won, and suddenly 6 hours later, no, it's totally reversed.
And people's explanation was like, "Oh, it was all the mail-in ballots," and I'm like, "Really? This many people voted? Like,
all at the same time, right?
Over 80 million something. I mean, the jump in the numbers alone made me skeptical. I don't believe that many people voted for Trump or Biden. I mean, right. the amount of the numbers are such a huge leap from the 2016 election. It's like the people that say, "Oh, well, it's the emergency circumstances of COVID," and all. I'm like, I'm sorry, this is weird.
Yeah.
Well, it's if the whole we found a shoebox of another 50,000 votes in this crucial district. If that happened in any unfriendly country, we would say it's a bit. That's the electoral integrity of a banana republic. And it wouldn't even be an unfair to say thing to say, but it happens here. It's like, oh, that's just.
Curiously, all those votes for one particular candidate, not split between them.
Now, I think if Trump wins, I mean, it might say something about the power of the pro-Israel lobby. Like, do you guys agree with that, or am I saying?
Yeah. I'm not sure it's so decisively in the Trump camp. I mean, like we said, I think there'd be a case for that if there was actual dissent against what Biden's been doing. But besides some people protesting and then getting blacklisted and possibly expelled for protesting, I don't see any compelling evidence that.
Yeah, those are two good issues. So number one is the fact that Kamala is ostensibly just as pro-Israel as Trump is. And then the other issue is there's a lot of pro-Israel people on board with Kamala who aren't on the pro-Trump side. So yeah,
it's not even that. Is that even the anti-Israel, even the pro-Palestine people, it's as I said, it's not a deal breaker, and I think it also helps that Kamala switched.
Well, it is for some. I mean, there are key demographics in some of these swing states, like Michigan. There, the Arab vote, the Muslim vote is significant. That's a closed state. It could end up having an impact. If the election comes down to, if it's this neck and neck where it comes down to one or two states, that could be a significant factor.
The problem is that the concept of a protest vote. I mean, we understand it with Russia, like when Navalny told his supporters in their Duma election to vote, just vote communist regardless of who it is. We understand, Western people all understood that. But if you say, you know what, I'm just going to vote for Jill Stein, or God forbid you say I'm going to do a protest vote, I'm going to vote for Trump. They'll tear the people in your own echo chamber will tear you apart. They'll tear you to pieces for saying a matter of tribal loyalty. It is vote blue, no matter who. Vote blue, no matter how many dead Palestinian kids there are. So,
Definitely there's a bit, the Democrats are pushing anti-Stein rhetoric, right? Because they see her as somebody who's going to take away votes from the Democrat. And yeah, they're really aggressive and in your face. And it's ridiculous because, Jill Stein is the most principled of them all. Like we can criticize her for, I guess she was badgered into calling Putin a dictator or something, right? And like,
Yeah.
it's tough. It's tough being a politician and living in the West, but and being principled. Like it's really tough. So I give her a pass on that. But I mean, she's really good. I mean, I saw her on several podcasts with her VP, and very impressive. You can tell that she just seems real genuine too, which is you don't get that with the politicians from the the mainstream parties. But yeah, the Democrats are really going after her because they know, especially in places like Michigan. So in Michigan, she's polling among Muslims. She's polling the highest. She's out polling, either Democrats or Republicans in Michigan among Muslims. So they're scared of her and they're going after her. But no, how much difference does it make whether it's Kamala or Trump? I don't think too much because I don't think the president really has a lot of power. They're more of a figurehead and a rubber stamp. But then again, you can make the argument that Trump is less of a rubber stamp than Kamala would be. But then you got to ask yourself, well, what is the agenda? Is there a unified agenda, or is there disagreement about the agenda? So it is complex, and we spent a good hour and 15 minutes discussing it, and you guys haven't given me any certainty, and so I'm not happy with you. But
we have to live in an age of uncertainty.
But I think we might get some big changes pretty soon. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. October surprise. We haven't really seen a major October surprise yet. And, Netanyahu could be planning one, and he could be timing it, for maximum electoral impact.
I've been saying that for a while. I mean, Israel, apart from its lobby, with its decisions, its policy decisions, with this standoff right now, has the ability to directly impact the U.S. election outcome, just with its actions alone. If it were
to benefit Trump, right? To benefit Trump and to make it more difficult for Harris.
If they do something that's, I mean, not that what they haven't done already isn't appalling enough, but I mean, even if it's not a protest vote, even if it's just sitting out the election altogether, especially with younger demographics. Israel has become extremely radioactive, and I can see a lot of people just being so dismayed that just not. I mean, yes, of course, the Democrats have their core cult vote, but I can see people it reaching a point of no return. I mean, yes, I agree with Ian that. I mean, and I've encountered them myself. These people who, what Israel's doing is not, or somehow is not a fucking red line. There is no red line that the Biden administration can cross for these people to swear off their blind allegiance to the Democratic Party cult. I completely agree about that. But there are some people, I think, significant enough in certain places that are key to the election outcome that could impact the vote and enough. If what Israel is doing, especially if it's something really insane in the next few weeks, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yes. Okay. So we will wrap it up. Everybody okay with that? Anybody have any last thoughts before we reconvene on Friday? So yeah, we had a lot of discussion, a lot of live viewers. Everything is relative when I say a lot, but a lot for our normal program. So thank you very much, and we will see you again on Friday for episode 118. Thank you.